Hey, welcome back to the channel, Growing Up Punk. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you've been hanging out for a little bit with me or with us, you know, Growing Up Punk is a podcast and now a YouTube channel about punk rock and all of its friends. So on previous episodes of this iteration of Growing Up Punk, we've been talking about just some of the vinyl records that I have in my collection and sort of, you know, what they've meant, where they've come from, that sort of thing. Why, I guess you could say, I own some of them. So this time around, though, we're going to do something a little bit different. You probably noticed by the title of this episode, we're going to be looking at thrifting and things that I found while thrifting, because I don't know about you, but I love to go thrifting. I used to go specifically looking for vinyl, and now I go specifically looking for t-shirts and CDs. And actually for a while, my t-shirt goal, what I was looking for, was always California sports teams for whatever reason, because I could go in and buy any silly, ridiculous t-shirt, but I wanted to go looking for something and having a game. Well, that's kind of changed. That was just sort of a silly thing in the past. Now, I just go looking for t-shirts and CDs, and I found a couple t-shirts. Starting off, we did what we call the tour, where we go around to different thrift shops in the area. So this was the first thing I want to show you as I hide my face. It's a t-shirt for a band called The Copyrights. Now, I came across this shirt and I thought, The Copyrights, that sounds like a band. I'd never heard them, never necessarily even heard of them, but I knew by the name that this was a band. So I looked it up. The Copyrights, they're a punk band, kind of in the vein of Ramones, Screeching Weasel sort of thing. And I really liked the shirt design that they had going on here. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna pick it up, I'm gonna take it home. The only downside is kind of smells like weed. So if you happen to be watching, sir or ma'am who own that shirt, it smells like weed. Hopefully that'll wash out, right? I don't know. I don't smoke weed, so I don't know. The other shirt I found is kind of a fun one, in that, as you can see, it's for a band called Secret Rivals. Now, Secret Rivals, the funny story behind this one is that, as I show you the back of the shirt here, you can see, sort of, it says it's Edmonton Hardcore. Don't believe the hype. Edmonton Hardcore, Secret Rivals. What is kind of a funny story about this one is that Secret Rivals is actually a band that my friend James used to be in a number of years ago. He actually told me when I sent him a picture of the shirt, he said that was after his time in the band. He was no longer in the band when that came out, but still a pretty rad shirt anyways that I came home with. So pretty pumped on that. So why don't we get into the CDs that I found, and I got to rearrange them for storytelling purposes, because I shot this video once and it may still be happening. There's a bunch of noise going on in the background, so I'm shooting it again. Here we are. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I mentioned in the first one, but I often refer to this as the dungeon. It's becoming less dungeon and more decorated. Spent some time putting some things up. We got Face to Face, big choice, classic record. Descendants, Milo Goes to College, classic record. Some Frank Turner, Tape Deck Heart, classic record. And getting into this, we'll add more stuff, you know, kind of as I wipe stuff off my face. We'll add more stuff as it comes in. This is actually, for those of you who are fans of vinyl, going, why has he got a record on the wall? It was one that shipped and it was warped. And so I got another one sent to me, so I held on to that one specifically for this, so I can hang it on the wall. Anyway, this first CD, you'll notice something. It's lacking the CD book. Well, that's because it's right here. This being the Offspring, Ixnay on the Ombre. Now, if you're familiar with the show, we did an episode on the Offspring a while ago, a number of months ago. And in that episode, I stated the fact, because I still believe it, that Ixnay on the Ombre is my favorite Offspring record. So when I came across this one in a thrift store, I was all about it. I was like, yeah, why not? Mota. Had to bring it home with me. This next one, this is kind of funny, because if you follow me on Twitter, which is @DavidGrowingUp. By the way, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram @GrowingPunkPod. You can find the podcast wherever you find podcasts. I feel like I should probably do that at some point, say that sort of thing, because this really is a tool to just try and promote the podcast and just let me talk to myself in my basement. Anyway, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, if you can, my wife is sewing. She's sewing masks, I think, upstairs. Hopefully, I don't know how loud that's coming through. Sorry if it's bugging you, though. Anyway, this next one, if you follow me on Twitter, I had tweeted, you know, I've been standing in line at this thrift store waiting to get in for about 20 or 30 minutes. I said, they better have a copy of a Jimmy Eat World album I don't have, or Weezer Blue. were what I was kind of looking for, and make it worth the wait. And well, I mean, close enough, right? Weezer, Green Album. Funny story about this one. I saw Weezer on tour for this record, actually, when they came out of hiatus and whatnot. Of course, if you know the story of Weezer, they kind of disappeared after Pinkerton. They had the Blue Album, which was huge. Then they released Pinkerton, where Rivers got introspective and raw in his lyrics. And it actually went on to be, Pinkerton went on to be kind of like a cult album, influencing a ton of bands that would come after that. But the critical reception and the numbers kind of sent Rivers into this downward spiral and disappeared for a while. Also, he had surgery, I believe, on his leg. He had one leg that was shorter than the other, so he's getting it all even. And tons of stuff that went on before this record came out. So I got to see them on tour for this album with my friend Grant. Now, Grant, he actually said to me, I never owned this physically. I had a burned copy of it, which was a burned copy of his album. And he said, I'm going to let you burn this because I know one day you'll buy it. So finally bought it. That would have been back in, well, when did this come out? I want to say they were touring, 2001. It was 2002 that I saw them. So, I mean, it's been long overdue, you could say. This next one, we tend to, punk rock and all of its friends, so we'll include like alternative rock in there, right? I mean, Weezer, these guys are probably more in line with Weezer than Weezer is with punk and emo anyway. But this one is Eve 6, which I took this one as a sign because when we were going around to the different stores, I just kept seeing it on the CD shelves. And so finally I was like, all right, I'm going to buy it. I can't not buy it. I've seen it in every single store we've been in. So here we are. I bought it. Eve 6. I mean, I was semi-familiar with this record. I'd heard some of the songs off it, obviously Inside Out, Tongue Tied, a couple that, sort of jump out. Showerhead. When I was a teenager listening to this album, Showerhead and the line, I loved you while he was in you in the shower. It was that was one that would get stuck in my head for whatever reason. Go figure, right? So Eve 6 brought that one home, and you know what? It's pretty good. It's got some great songs on there. It's got some decent songs. It's got some songs. It is what it is. This next one that I came home with, I was super pumped to find this and incredibly surprised to find this, if only because, I mean, it's not really like, I mean, you go through thrift stores and you go through the music and you see a lot of the same stuff, right? Because, I mean, it's a lot of stuff that people bought that then you decided, man, I don't want to keep this anymore. So this one I was surprised because the fact that someone bought it and eventually decided they didn't want to keep it, and it wasn't scratched, so like it wasn't like they were getting rid of it because they couldn't play it anymore. In fact, it's in pretty dang good shape. Look, you can, reflections. Can we do this? Anyway, this album is one, and I haven't told you what it is yet. This is one of my favorites from when I was a teenager, for sure. Monine, The Theory of Harmonial Value. This album is, if you haven't heard it, if you don't know who Monine is, if you're here, Aaron, he's my co-host, my buddy on the podcast. He's not a fan of Monine at all, so I oftentimes will bring it up and just bug him about it. But this band is unstinking believable. They were one of my favorite bands to see live for the longest time. And, they kind of gone, I think they're together again. I don't know if they're making new music or not. I think they, they kind of play some shows here and there. Obviously, no one's playing shows right now. I don't know if they've been planning on releasing new music or not, but it's been a while. And I hadn't seen them live in forever. Thought I never would see them live again until, I don't know if it was last summer or the summer before. You'll have to forgive me. But they opened for Dashboard Confessional at the Calgary Stampede. Now, if you're sitting there going, what Calgary Stampede? The You're unfamiliar, the Calgary Stampede it's what it sounds like. I mean, it's world famous, so you probably, even if you're not from around here, you probably know what it is. I just realized my mic is in. It's not even on, but it's in. We'll get that out of there, sort of. Get out of here, Mike. Where was I? Oh, I was talking about Monine. The Calgary Stampede, it's a giant rodeo. They've got bull riding, they've got chuck wagons, they've got it all, right? But they also have a stage where they like to bring in rock bands of sorts, varying degrees. And you pay to get on the grounds, and you can go to this. It's the Coca-Cola stage is what it is. It's sponsored by Coca-Cola. So you can go with just your general admission. You don't have to pay extra to go to it like you do for some of the other events there. But Monine opened for Dashboard Confessional. Like, talk about a weird group of bands to play at a rodeo. But they did. And Monine being one of Canada's, I'd say, like, top-tier emo bands. They were signed to Vagrant Records for a while. Their last couple of records came out on Vagrant. This one did not. I don't know if it was ever re-released by Vagrant. This says Small Man Records. I feel like, I'm trying to remember if it was, because I believe this was their first full length, and if it was independently released first and then released by, I mean, Small Man's an independent label anyway. But regardless, such a good album. They have a song called The Passing of America, which was always like their last song that they would play, and I'd seen them a number of times, and it was always just like a show. You went to go see them play that last song, The Passing of America, because you didn't know what was going to happen, whether Kenny, the singer, was going to be jumping off of stacks of speakers and just like laying himself out on the floor, or, you know, all the bands that were on the tour were going to come onto the stage and dogpile as they would continue playing the song. One time they played it, I saw them go into, I want to say it was I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness, going into that song and coming back. It was always something, and actually the last time we saw them with Dashboard Confessional at the Calgary Stampede, they... Kenny came down in the crowd, put his guitar down, came down into the crowd and like parted the fans and proceeded to run and do a front flip, land on his feet, run back on stage and finish the song. So they always did something. It was always crazy. Monine, one of the best live shows I've ever seen, and I would highly recommend it. This next CD that I came across is a band that is not from my teenage years. Not at all, actually. I mean, maybe as they were beginning, yes, like my late teenage years, maybe even when I was in my early 20s. This album, not as much. I'm talking about The Academy Is... and the album is Fast Times at Barrington High. Now, this is my favorite Academy Is album, and I would actually put it up there against a lot of albums as being one of my favorites. I don't know what it is about it, whether it's because, you know, the lyrics on this record kind of give me, you know, vibes of... I'm a sucker for, like, teen drama shows, and so the lyrics on the songs on this are very fitting for that. It is what it is. But anyway... And it's very melodic. They kind of started to me as like, you know, a Fall Out Boy light, you know, kind of sounded like Fall Out Boy with a number of bands that kind of came out around that time. But this record is beyond any of that, I think. It's real good. It holds up real well. It's just a pop punk gem. If you haven't heard it, go check it out, I would say. This next one, this was kind of fun because I was in one store and I was flipping through and I came across this album and I was so pumped. I was like, you're kidding me. Because this is it's a good album, and I pulled it out, opened it up, CD was scratched to hell. So bummed. I'm like, all right, it's the only time I'd seen it thus far in my thrifting, and so I put it back. I was a little disappointed. I did end up coming away from that store with another CD, so I'll tell you about that in a minute, but I was bummed because the CD that I just pulled out is really good, and I had to put it back because it was scratched, and there's no point. There's no point, right? So, get to the next thrift store, and I'm going through, and I think this was actually the thrift store that I got The Academy Is and Weezer, maybe. I was even holding like Fall Out Boy Under the Cork Tree I had in my hand, but I decided to put it down. Didn't buy it. But anyway, this one I did, because as soon as I saw it, and as soon as I saw it was in good shape, there was no way I was passing it up. We're talking about the Gaslight Anthem, the 59 sound. And my love and appreciation for this record was kind of like, I was late to the party. In fact, I didn't really go back and dig into it until Sorority Noise and their record, You're Not As Blank As You Think You Are, because in one of the songs, I can't remember the specific song or exactly how the lyric goes, but he talks about hearing his favorite song, the 59 sound, and I was like, oh, all right, so I went back to it. And I mean, if you know anything about the Gaslight Anthem, they're like, I mean, they're basically, I guess you could say they're the punk rock version of Bruce Springsteen. There's something about that sound that's super nostalgic and comforting, all, you know, kind of wrapped into one, even if you hadn't really heard it before. Another band that reminds me of that is very similar vein to the Gaslight Anthem. It'd actually be Blacklist Royals, and that band I got into because their drummer, Rob Rufus, he wrote an autobiography where he was telling the story about when he was a teenager. He was diagnosed with cancer, kind of going through that as he was starting a band and supposed to be playing on Warped Tour and all this stuff. So I read that book first, and then was like, I gotta listen to this album. And I believe Die Young With Me, is that what it's? I'm drawing a blank right now. It's something along those lines. But a lot of those songs are kind of about him going through that. So it's awesome. If you haven't listened to Blacklist Royals, go check them out. But yeah, the Gaslight Anthem 59 sound. It's so good. So this last one that I wanted to tell you about, I told you when I went into the store and there was the Gaslight Anthem all scratched up. I was bummed. But going back to the beginning of all of this, I said I was sitting outside of one thrift store and I said, I've been waiting in line, and if they don't have Weezer Blue, which I ended up finding Weezer Green. Now I should say this wasn't at this one store. We didn't actually end up going into that store because we waited in line for so long and we were just like, screw this. So we just left. But I said, you know, in that tweet, if they have Weezer Blue or a record by Jimmy Eat World that I don't already own, huzzah! The static prevails. The static prevails. Static prevails. Jimmy Eat World. I've never actually owned this album. I've listened to it a number of times because streaming services allow you to do that, but I've never actually owned it, and now I do, and I'm incredibly grateful for that because it's just a magnificent thrifting find. Now, for me, most of this listening, I listen to CDs in my car. I actually stopped buying CDs for a little bit because, you know, I was like, I've got an aux cable or Bluetooth in my vehicles. I can just use what's on my phone. But then in my car, the aux cable broke and I got annoyed and didn't replace it. So I just started buying CDs again. So here we are. And those are the ones that I thrifted just in these couple of days. Maybe I'll go through some of the other ones. I've made the mistake. So like this thing right here, it's obviously just CD books in a frame. And the thing about these is that they were all thrifted. Like they're all albums that I listened to growing up and was able to find in later years thrifted. Now, I've got a giant CD book. I don't really, I'm a little bummed that I don't keep like that. I mean, this storage cabinet, how awesome would it be if it was full of, you know, CDs? But I don't do that. I stopped. I got rid of all of them at one point in time. And so to have these back, I don't have a lot of all, like these CD covers, for instance, the books. They're just ones I've thrifted recently, right? So I've started keeping them again, which I'm sure will really annoy my wife. But anyway, maybe this will keep changing, or I'll just add to it. Eventually the wall will just be covered in CD books. And I apologize if you're one of those people who are like, you can't do that. They got to stay in their case and pristine. Just so you know, I threw out a ton of them. And so for me to have these back, I'm just like looking at them going, man, they could really decorate a wall with some of these things. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm rambling. I should say thank you for checking out the channel. If you haven't checked out the podcast, please do so. We've got some episodes here on the YouTube channel, as well as on all your favorite podcast apps. That's where most of them live. If you're watching this on IGTV, sorry that I just said it's YouTube. That's what it's for. Anyway, if you can check some of them out on YouTube here, but you're really not going to get the full experience. We've got music and stuff that goes in them, and YouTube just won't allow that. We've got interviews with some great artists and just episodes on some of your favorite bands. If you're a fan of punk, especially growing up in like 90s punk, like myself and Aaron did, check it out. We'd appreciate it. Tell your friends about it. Tell your friends about the channel. If you enjoy this video, if you've got a buddy, if you've got a friend who loves thrifting, you know, maybe we can start talking about it. Anyway, that will do it. So make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Go check out the podcast. Follow us on our social media at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find our personal Instagrams and Twitters there as well. Adios.